joint meeting with the Ad Hoc Waste Reduction and Recycling Committee about half hour after we finish a couple of items in the Energy and Environment Committee. We do expect every council member of the committee to be present, and I believe some of them are on their way. So with that, why don't we, with the consent of my colleague, and we'll wait till we get one more council member here after to make it official, but we'll ask item number 2 and 3 be put on consent. Is that okay, Mr. Zine? Oh, there's a speaker card for item number 2. Okay. So we'll just do item number 3, consent. And we have Mr. Alarcon joining us. He's a member of both the Ad Hoc on Waste Reduction and Recycling Committee. He's the chair, and he's a member of the E&E Committee. Yeah. Mr. Alarcon, so is it okay if we set item number 3 on consent for the E&E agenda? Okay. We'll take up item number 2 at this time.
There we go. Sorry. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Rafael Prado with the CLA's office. Item number 2 relates to the DWP report relative to proposed amendment number 2 to 9 existing agreements to assist the DWP with implementation of its ongoing Renewable Portfolio Standard Program. We have staff from the Department of Water and Power.
We have one public comment. We'll take the public comment, and then we'll see if there's any questions. William Ernest Shanonik?
William Shunawork. Yeah, I was looking at this thing, and I was just concerned that by taking more and more time to do this, they're not going to end up meeting the renewable portfolio standards, because this, whatever this happens to be, has to happen before the next step and the next step, and you run into 2020 pretty quick.
Thank you, sir. So, no questions on that? No objection? We'll move that item forward.
Okay.
And if we could go to item number 1 now, please.
Item number 1, DWP report relative to proposed amendment number 2 to an existing contract with Intermountain Power Agency to allow the Intermountain Power project to convert from coal to natural gas. In addition, Mr. Chair, we have a report from the ratepayer advocate, Dr. Fred Pickle.
Great, thank you. So we could have staff from DWP, please, present on this item. Got to push the mic. Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Eric Tharp. I'm the Director of External Generation for the Department of Water and Power. Want to introduce yourself? Hit the button.
Aaron Benjamin, the head of the power system.
I would like to take you through a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to focus on about 5 slides today that talk about eliminating coal from the Los Angeles' power supply. We really can't talk about eliminating coal without also talking about several other aspects of our power system. Our power system is about 100 years old, and in the next 15 years, we're going to replace 70% of it. A part of it is replacing our coal. Another portion is repowering our coastal power plants. And another portion is adding 2/3 more renewable energy to our system. If you go to the slide that says our future power supply is coal-free, there are 2 pie charts there. And there are 4 keys that you can see from these 2 charts. The first is today coal makes up 39% of our power supply. In the future that will be 0, so coal is going away. I was recently at a neighborhood council meeting out in the valley, and when I said the coal portion was 39% of our portfolio, one of the members said, so it's like all of the San Fernando Valley, you're having to replace that amount of power. And I thought that was a good illustration. The second thing you'll notice from this chart is that energy efficiency goes from 1% to 2%, so we want to do all we can on our system and in our customers' residences and businesses to increase the efficiency of our energy use. The third thing you will notice is renewables go from 20% to 33%, and lastly, natural gas goes from 24 to 47. If you skip a couple of slides, the two power plants that remain in our portfolio that LA has an interest in, one is the Navajo Generating Station located in Arizona. This plant we own 21% of. We introduced a proposal to have one of the other purchasers buy our share of that plant. That's not up for your consideration today.
Can I just stop you for a second? I want to ask you a question. When you said energy efficiency, what is that?
Pardon me?
When you talk about energy efficiency on the pie chart, you went from 1% to 10%?
Yes.
What are you talking about?
We're talking about lighting upgrades, the things that people can do in their homes to save energy, and the same in businesses. There have been tremendous technology advances so that people can consume less energy and still get all the benefits.
Okay, thank you.
The second power plant that we own and that we're talking about today or focusing on today is the Intermountain Power Project located in Delta, Utah. That project we just have a power purchase contract for. We do not own anything. And it has 36 different power purchasers, and we are one of the 36. We're the largest of the 36. There are 6 in California and 30 in Utah that participate in that power plant. Our philosophy to replace all of our coal is to do it in 3 tiers. The first tier is to look at energy efficiency, to do more with less. The second tier is increase our renewable portfolio with wind, solar, and geothermal. And then thirdly, back up the renewable energy with natural gas. The natural gas will be used to firm and shape our renewable supplies. On the next slide, we're talking about the state law requires that DWP exit coal in 2027. And so LA and other purchasers faced a choice. We could either stay at IPP to 2027 and then go somewhere else and build something else, or we could remain at that facility, convert it to a smaller natural gas power plant, free up transmission for more renewables in the region, and save on the costs of new construction. Why build at IPP? We've invested billions of dollars in that facility already. It has 4 transmission lines connected to that power plant. The largest transmission line brings DC electricity into the Southern California area from Delta, Utah. And by building something smaller at the site, we are freeing up more space on the transmission for renewable energy. These next 2 slides are really the important ones for the action that you're looking at today. And they are, what are we really seeking? This slide shows that there are several steps that have to happen before we can complete our exit from coal at IPP. Some of these steps have to happen in Utah, and some of them have already happened in Utah. The first is Utah needed to change their state law, which they have done, to allow IPP to use natural gas at that site. The second is IPA, the owner of that facility, has to agree to amend their corporate structure to allow for natural gas. They have done that as well. And that leaves us to the step we're in today, which is amending our current contract to allow that plant to be converted from natural gas, or from coal to natural gas. We need all 36 participants to take the same action. So all of the utilities will be asked to consider the same item that you're considering today. When all 36 have done that, we will receive a renewal power sales contract that gives us access to that facility, both the site and the transmission, for another 50 years. The contract amendment that you are reviewing today does a number of things. It would allow for the fuel to change from coal to natural gas. That conversion will be completed by July 1, 2025, and it allows with the conversion to be done earlier if the participants wish to do that. The second thing is the power plant size is reduced by at least 1/3, and by reducing that, we allow more room for renewable sources to be delivered into California. The third is that it allows the size of the replacement to be reduced even further. So it could be made smaller, and it allows an alternative configuration or alternative type of sources to be considered as long as they meet the California Energy Commission regulations. So not only can the plant be made smaller, but it can also use a different technology if the participants agree to that. The next item is it provides funds for decommissioning the coal units. And then lastly, it gives us another 50 years to use the site and the transmission. So for both of our coal facilities, at Navajo Generating Station, our plan is to exit by the end of 2015, and for Intermountain Power Project, to no longer take coal from that facility after July 1, 2025.
Mr. Eloquent?
Could you describe, in the slides, you talked about what it would take to expedite? Actually, you said the other partners would have to agree to different timelines in order to expedite. So could you describe the process of expediting to accelerate how quickly we get there?
It would require an affirmative vote of the coordinating committee, which is an 80% vote. LA is about 48% of that 80% vote, so we would need others, a majority of the others, to agree to that acceleration. And it would require the owners, the IPA board, to also vote to do that.
And can you tell us anything about the likelihood of that, or are efforts being made to seek that out, or what is the status of that?
The likelihood of that happening will depend a lot on new regulations on coal. There could be regulations that happen on coal that would make it more economical to go sooner. And when that happens, I think all the participants would vote to do that. Today, we have debt service on that project that extends until 2023. So to accelerate earlier than 2023 would be meaning we're going to pay debt on a plant that we're not taking any megawatts from, and we're going to pay debt on a plant that we are taking megawatts from. So the window, it depends greatly on what happens in the regulatory realm, but the easiest window would be somewhere between 2023 and 2025 for an acceleration.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the record, I'd like to say that Mr. Koretz and Mr. Labange have joined us, and we have a presentation as well from our ratepayer advocate, Dr. Pickle, after this. So you want to ask your questions now of DWP or afterwards?
Dan, I went to 1010. So
Sorry about
that's
that,
all
Mr.
right. It's
Labange.
okay. And number two, I just think the steps that Water and Power are taking are big steps in a great direction to have reliable energy with the infrastructure that they built over the years with the transmission that brings us to Los Angeles. So I think it's a very positive effort that you are making. So for all of us, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zine?
There's mandates established by the state. This is not an option without the mandate from the state. In other words, this is being pushed by the state of California.
The state of California passed a bill in 2006 that said we couldn't extend coal-purchased power plants or extend contracts at coal facilities. Whenever there's a renewal that comes up, that's the end of the road.
Now, is that for all cities in California?
Yes, it is.
And what are other states doing when it comes to this situation?
I'm not aware that any other states have taken a similar action.
What about the federal government? Are they imposing any restrictions in this arena? Because there's other states around that are using coal, and I'm wondering if California is unique in trying to clean up the environment, or if there's a broader scale on a federal level where they're moving in this direction.
There are a number of pending EPA regulations that would affect national coal use, but many of them, like I said, are pending.
So the only one that's been done to this point is California mandating upon the cities, and we're moving forward with the direction that we are obligated to do, or there's heavy fines.
That's the one I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, you're the expert. That's why I want to make sure. Thank you.
But they're not doing it in the cities, is that?
Mr.
They're doing it to, just a question on the cities. It's the utilities, whether it's PG&E, Edison, or Pacific Gas, or San Diego Gas, correct?
Right. It
Not the
applies.
city.
It applies to all
Yeah.
utilities in California.
Glendale,
Burbank,
Power,
Pasadena,
Azusa.
Riverside.
Thank you, sorry.
Mr. Correct, you have questions now for DWP or F?
Just a comment that I couldn't be more delighted that we're moving off coal, and this is a truly historic event that I hope the rest of the country and the rest of the world, particularly China and India, may follow, but we're at least taking a historic first step, and I want to thank Ron and his whole staff for an amazing amount of work, and I know this has been kind of like herding cats to get it done, but I wanted to express my appreciation. And also mention again that since the new IPP contract could potentially extend as long as to 2077, we have a large responsibility to think not just of what will be happening during our time here, but council members many years into the future and their constituents. And so I'm pleased that we have decided we will take until 2020 to determine what technology will be the best and the safest and the cleanest to transform IPP into. And wanted to thank you for that opportunity as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we will have a presentation by Dr. Pickle,
Yes.
our ratepayer advocate.
Yes. He's
And,
on his way.
Are you here? Okay, there he is. And then we will go into public comment on this item.
Good afternoon. I'm Fred Pickle, Office of Public Accountability and Ratepayer Advocate. My comments are on primarily the IPP coal elimination strategy, but also some general comments about the overall coal elimination strategy of DWP. First, what do I recommend? I support the DWP resolution on the execution of the second amendatory power sales contract. This is a first step for all IPP participants to plan ahead and start putting their money where their mouths are. And this is a difficult step. there's a watchword among investment bankers: deals of 3 will never be. Well, DWP is doing a deal of 36, a true challenge. One of the challenges is, as it stands right now, today's technology plan as proposed in DWP's IRP is too expensive from a couple perspectives. And for that reason, I think it's important we continue exploring alternatives on the elimination of coal. Today's specific plan doesn't work, but there are other mixes, and we have 7 years to work on alternatives. What's my view of the goals? I think this committee's already recited some of those. Certainly from a ratepayer perspective, reliable power at a reasonable cost is up at the top. But we also have compliance with legal mandates on coal elimination, but it's important to have transparency on the cost impact of that at the same time. And third, there is leadership on carbon emissions reductions. That's one of our city goals. Directly, we don't have much of an impact. We're 0.04% of world carbon emissions for DWP, but our impact comes from demonstrating we can do this at an affordable cost. And then 3 other key questions. What's the projected cost to ratepayers? Is this cost acceptable compared to alternatives? And can we do this cheaper while achieving goals? In terms of the cost, on slide 2, the state mandate is for not renewing contracts, and for Navajo, that renewal would have to occur in 2019, and for IPP in 2027. The city has moved that forward 4 years for Navajo and 2 years for IPP. The cost of accelerating this coal elimination is about $50 million, a little more, for Navajo, $50 million per year, and about $250 million per year for IPP. That means the total cost over this period, the 4-year acceleration for Navajo is roughly $200 million, and for IPP, roughly $500 million. Those numbers sound big. What's it mean per person in LA? This isn't per household, this is cost per month. It's about $1 per person per month in the city of LA for Navajo, and about $5 per person per month for IPP. There are lots of uncertainties in this. When we're comparing this, we're comparing natural gas prices and renewables costs versus the cost of continuing coal. So these numbers will change substantially over time. So answer in terms of what's the impact of accelerating this earlier than the mandate for the city of LA, about $700 million for today's estimates, and these numbers come from DWP's integrated resource plan. What's the cost in terms of CO2 reduction from the coal elimination? These numbers don't mean much in the abstract, but it's about $26 a ton for Navajo and about $109 a ton for IPP. What's that mean in terms of affordability? Are we getting a good deal on these? For Navajo, the answer is yes. During this period, when we look at other ways of reducing carbon emissions, the answer is the market seems to say $26 a ton looks like a fair price. In the longer term, for IPP, the number is $109 a ton for carbon elimination. Compared to alternatives for carbon reduction, this is not as good a deal. So it's good we have those 7 years. Can we do this more cheaply? Maybe. Can renewables like large-scale wind and solar be expanded in this mix using the IPP location as a hub? Eric mentioned that possibility. And the cost of renewables and natural gas have both declined by huge factors over the last 5 years. Will that continue? No, there are uncertainties on all fronts. They might not. Second, there is the challenge of integrating renewables while maintaining reliability. We aren't going to be the first utility to go to the high level highest levels of renewables. We may have some time to work this out as we develop this plan. What's next for DWP? The bottom line, the Office of Public Accountability supports the DWP strategy with the warning on cost. Second, LA can play a leadership role in coal elimination, but we only have a worldwide impact if we show it can be done cost effectively. The DWP strategy for 2020s needs more creative solutions. We should continue exploring a broad range of alternatives, including wind and solar renewables and using the IPP site for integrating renewables, and perhaps transmission from other areas. Any questions?
One question I have.
Bunch.
Sorry, Mr. Weezer. When you make a statement, it's $1 a month, whatever, the people of Los Angeles are on a 2-month billing cycle. So if you could say per billing cycle, it's better for me to understand that it would be $20, you said $10 for a month, or $2 or whatever it is. So if you could articulate it in the cycle of what the ratepayers get billed, that's all.
If we change to a monthly billing cycle, would that be better?
Well, I don't know. I think people got used to it, and I don't think it's a proposal to change to a monthly cycle, but I just think people know it. And then the city's fees are every 2 months, so it works, so, and I also think it's thankful for DWP because you're the only one who bills every property, so we're able to attach the sanitation charge, which we were never supposed to have because we eliminate incinerators to clean the air, but everybody went to heaven from when they said that, so now they have that. Okay. Only one guy understood it, that's all right.
Well, I have a question for DWP. If you could come up to the table and sit next to the ratepayer, please. Now, what would be the response to the ratepayer advocates' conclusion that current forecast for accelerated phase-out of IPP is too expensive as planned and forecast now, that it is not a good deal? What's your response to that?
I guess I would say a couple of things. One, he took all of his numbers from the 2012 IRP, which is publicly available, but it is not what is proposed in the contract. So the IRP did not study an exit in 2025. The IRP assumed 1,150 megawatts of natural gas at IPP. This plan assumes for LA about 600, so it's got about half as much gas as the case he studied. As Dr. Pickle said, we're guessing at coal prices 12 years from now, and we're guessing at gas prices 12 years from now, and we're guessing at carbon prices, and we're guessing no EPA regulations go into effect. So if any of those things go the other way, I think it changes the economics. The good thing about the contract is we have the time, and the contract contemplates looking at other options, and we will do that from now until 2020 when we have to pull the trigger.
Okay. So you feel comfortable now, given the portfolio that we have in terms of moving in that direction, and you're saying several things may affect it, either the portfolio that we have, or second, the cost per each one of those alternatives that we have?
Yes.
Thanks. Dr. Pickle, you have, did that conclude your...
I think what he's saying is correct and fits with what I'm saying. We should move ahead with the immediate resolution, and we have 7 years to explore alternatives. Okay. And a lot happens in the energy business in that long of a period.
Okay, thank you. Does that conclude your presentation, Dr. Pickle?
Yes. Yes.
Any questions or comments? You could, two might stay up there. We have questions and comments by the staff, by the council members. Mr. Councilmember Olguin?
Yeah, Dr. Pickle, I don't remember exactly the language of the definition of your position, but was it singularly focused on cost analysis, or was it also to consider ratepayers' other interests?
The exact definition is public independent analysis of things that can affect water or power rates.
But it's not indicative of advocacy one way or the other.
the word advocate is in the title of the section, it's not in the body of the section.
So if we were to propose policies that were good for the environment of the ratepayer, I'm just curious that it always seems that you have a bent against increasing costs, but I don't remember that being your function, as opposed to just telling us what the costs, what the impacts are. And also, I don't see any benefits analysis on other important issues like the environment.
Well, actually, this includes this. There were two questions to this. One is, how much does it cost? I've answered the question, how much it costs. Accelerating about $250 million a year for IPP. Second question is that a good deal? That's the benefit cost analysis. And as it's configured now, it looks like it costs $109 a ton to reduce carbon. But the market, if we look at our alternatives and other studies on carbon reductions, other sources of carbon reduction say the costs for eliminating carbon are not going to be that high at that time frame.
Yeah. Yes, I just want to say that that this is an issue of leadership, and part and parcel of our responsibilities as leaders is to determine whether or not we can improve not just the cost of a thing, but the betterment of our environment, but also we have to anticipate what kind of regulations are going to be coming down in the future. And those regulations are quite often dictated by political policy. And I have every anticipation that the policies are going to be much more supportive of cleaning up our environment as we move forward. And therefore, there will be opportunities to accelerate this program, if not dictated by pure cost issues, certainly dictated by public policy. Indeed, some of the discussion we're having right now was dictated by conversations that we've had in previous meetings. And so I think that I don't want to be singularly focused on cost issues. I would much appreciate a good analysis of what's coming down the line in terms of political policy related to energy costs, environmental improvements related to energy, and other social issues. Social justice is also, environmental justice is also a concern of mine. So for all those reasons, this report is, I do want to applaud the department for declaring a definitive time when we are free of coal-powered energy. But I also think we need to be mindful of advancements that are driven by political policy, and be. I would hope that in the future our reports would help us understand what's going on in the political realm as well. What kind of bills are pending in Congress? What kind of bills are pending in the state legislature that might impact how we come to these decisions? And I think too often we sort of press a stopwatch and assume that everything's going to be the same in the future. I know you don't make those assumptions, but in the presentations it seems as if we have stopped a watch and we're assuming everything's going to be the same in the future. And short of your comments that you're guessing at the prices of all these things and we can do no better, I think there should be a more thorough analysis of some of the political realities that might define our actions as we go forward. Anyway, but I do applaud the department for this report and having that definitive date. And I think it really is a historic moment, and I congratulate you for that.
Mr. Kretz?
Yeah, I have a few questions. But first, just a comment to build on Mr. Alarcon's comment. I guess the question is, as the ratepayer advocate, do you just represent the ratepayer's pocketbook, or do you represent the ratepayer as individuals, so that other things such as climate change and the air they breathe and the future that they deal with could be taken into account as well?
I do. This cost of carbon analysis tries to weigh that. And please understand what I'm suggesting is one of the key alternatives for this. It's using the IPP as a hub for greater usage of the large-scale wind and solar resources that exist in Wyoming and in the Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah areas.
And I should say I appreciate your suggestion that we go with more wind and more solar, and that we try to do this more cheaply while achieving our goals. I've got a general question. If a utility the size of DWP increases its investment in renewables, is it not likely that the cost of those renewables will go down, as we've seen with solar? As much more solar is built, the cost seems to come down. And are we factoring that into our cost analysis?
That has been, the cost analysis is DWP's integrated resource plan. But we have seen, as I mentioned in my analysis, the cost of solar and natural gas, for that matter, come down hugely over the last 5 years.
So are we assuming that, particularly with renewables, that as we invest more, have we actually factored that in, that it will continue to go down, or are we not making that assumption?
In the context of the world market, we're not big enough to really affect that market. It's more we're watching worldwide progress in especially solar technology. It's not clear how quickly that might improve over the next 5 years.
And we also have a number that we expect ratepayers to pay an increased amount monthly. Is it not true that if the ratepayers took advantage of the DWP's robust new energy efficiency portfolio, that they could actually shrink their monthly payment rather than increase it?
Yes.
And are we taking that into account as we assess the future costs?
Well, the future costs reflect the overall costs on the city, not per unit. These costs are incurred, including expectations for how well people might conserve. But
so we have factored that into these.
That is factored in, although you can always beat your neighbor and put more of the cost on them by conserving more.
And have we factored in the cost to ratepayers of remaining on coal power? And if we didn't make this change, the fact that additional regulations and other things would increase that cost? Have we looked at that, or just taken it as the current expenses?
As I understand, some additional costs associated with Navajo are included in the Navajo numbers, but not as much with IPP. I'd let DWP comment on the details of that, because it's their integrated resource plan.
If you could do that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think the Navajo costs assume no increases for emission controls, and part of the reason is we're going to have to get out by 2019, and so we probably would not support spending $1 billion, or our share of $1 billion, on the last 2 or 3 years of that plant's operation. So our model does not include the cost of, say, adding SCRs at Navajo today. At IPP, similarly, we've made conservative assumptions about regulatory costs. We've run scenarios with added regulations, but they're not reflected in the IRP.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, as a side note, I wonder if we could ask the ratepayer advocate reports to be included as part of the 3-day public notice to council file, so that we can be prepared to respond to any issues that get raised there.
Sure.
Any problem with that?
My challenge is my reports have to review DWP reports, and I would need to have those reports at least 3 days before I issue mine.
Is that all possible?
That's possible, isn't it, from the DWPN, to get that information available to Dr. Pickle?
Yes.
Okay.
Certainly on this issue we can.
Okay, thank you. We would add that to the recommendations of this report. Thank you. My final question is that I understand that a follow-up agreement will have to be approved to assign the actual amount of power expected to be delivered to the various utilities. When will that happen, or when do we anticipate that will happen?
We're anticipating that all 36 will approve these, the amendment like we hope LA will do, by sometime this summer, and so we would see something back to this body in the fall timeframe.
Okay. Thank you. So with that, we'll go to public comment, and DWP and the ratepayer may want to stay there just in case there's any follow-up. Our first speaker is Joe McLaughlin. I'll name a few people off, and if you can line up here. Rhodes Stevenson, and Felicia Bander.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Joe McLaughlin. I'm a retired administrator from the Los Angeles Unified School District. I live in Echo Park, which makes me a ratepayer, but I'd like to more precisely define that. I'm a bill payer, and my bill is a combination of the rate and how much I use, and I can control how much I use. Additionally, I'm a shareholder. LAWP belongs to the city, belongs to me as a member, a ratepayer. I consider this an investment in my future. One thing I know about the cost of fuel for energy is that it's going to go up. That's guaranteed. So if I look into the future of things, I want to have sustainable, affordable energy, and that means going to renewables. Second point I want to make is I'm a fairly optimistic person. I'm also a well-informed person. And the more I read and hear about climate change and the predictions that it's moving faster than we had anticipated, the more I know that we need to take leadership right here and make the correct decisions for our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Rhodes Stevenson and Felicia Bander.
Good afternoon. I'm Rhodes Stevenson. I want to commend the state of California and LA City for taking this bold step and setting an example for the rest of the country to get off coal. I would like us to keep our eye on the ball, however, and point out one thing, which is if those power plants, both the Navajo and the IPP, keep running on coal by selling their electricity to somebody else, they're putting out just as much pollution as they are today, and we haven't actually accomplished anything. I've read the DWP presentation from a month ago and some of the documents, and they use words like repower, convert, transform. But what I really read is they're going to build a brand new natural gas plant next to the coal plant. And so if that coal plant keeps operating because they could sell their electricity to somebody else, and then we build a natural gas plant next door, we've actually increased our emissions. So I think that when you negotiate this contract with the 36 other partners, they ought to, maybe the council would give direction to DWP to make it contingent upon closing that plant.
Thank you.
There's nothing in the document that guarantees that that coal plant will close.
Thank you. Felicia Bander and
Hello.
Kristen Eberhardt.
My name is Felicia Bander. NASA's chief climate scientist has said that stopping burning coal is the single most important action that can be taken to limit the atmospheric carbon, which is at the center of global warming. Worldwide, the burning of coal is a huge problem, but here in Los Angeles, you have an opportunity to limit our carbon emission and to help lead us back from the brink of irreversible climate change. We've already raised Earth's temperature 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Because there is a 50-year lag time between the emission of greenhouse gases and the effect of those emissions, if the world were to come to a screeching halt right now in our use of fossil fuels, we'd still be set to see an additional 2-degree increase. A 4-degree increase in global temperature is huge, and we're going to see that play out in a more volatile climate. Is my time up?
Thank you. Kristen Eberhardt and Kent Minalt. Are you Kent in the back? You could line up behind her so we could go to the next. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not Kristen. I'm Linda Escalante. Kristen had to leave to another meeting, but
Ooh, we usually don't allow for
Oh, sorry.
replacements, but yeah, Kristen's not here?
yeah, she had to leave
Okay,
last minute.
well,
Should
go
I
ahead.
put my card on it and then
Yeah, well, what is
go
your
back?
name? Did you say your
Linda
name?
Escalante?
What is it?
Linda Escalante.
Okay. We usually, per council rules, don't allow people to replace people,
Sorry,
but you
she
could,
just-
I'll fill out your card here and make
Okay.
it official.
On behalf of NRDC, I'm here to support LADWP getting off of coal. We are happy to see that this proposal does not lock us into any long-term commitments we might regret, but gives us several years to get the plan right. We look forward to work with LADWP and City Council and the Office of Ratepayers Advocates to get the plan right, maximize clean energy, and make LA a global leader. The time is now, and we can't go back. We must embrace the future, a future where we can power our society without destroying the environment we depend on. Thank you.
Thank you. Kent Minalt and Jonathan Klein.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kent Minot. Thank you so much for your careful consideration of this important measure. I'm wearing my very faded Beyond Coal T-shirt here. I'm doing it because I wanted to show you the T-shirt that I've been wearing since January of 2010 when I started working on this campaign. And since that time, the conversation about these issues have changed profoundly around the country. Most Americans are acutely aware of the dangers of climate change right now, much more than they were back then. And when Vice President Al Gore stood with us last month in front of the Ferraro building, he also pointed out how intensely the conversation has changed over the past few years, very rapidly. I think a key point in that change happened right in the middle of that time period when General Manager Nichols came down to a meeting at Scope, our allies on Florence Avenue back down in South Central LA. And during that meeting, a young man got up and acknowledged that he was suffering unemployment at the time. And he talked to General Manager Nichols and he said, General Manager, if my utility bill goes up by $5, well, it's a problem, but not a serious one. But man, I need a job. And we were talking about the job expansion through the Utilities Pre-Craft Training Program in energy efficiency. And I think efficiency is the key to realizing Dr. Pickle's mandate for flexibility and lowering the price on our utility bills so that we can get out of coal quickly. So let's become not only the greenest city in the country, but the most energy efficient as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jonathan Klein and William Ernest Shunnerwork.
Hi, Rabbi Jonathan Klein, and while most of my work is around worker justice issues, I think this is a great opportunity for us to come together and see the intersectionality of justice issues. To echo both council members Koretz and Alarcon, the community cares about all costs, including the hidden costs to our environment, which can threaten life itself. We were given the capacity to be partners with God, and as such, we can progress in our understanding of stewardship of the planet. Are we going to stick to the old models and curse ourselves by breathing poisons and killing our children's future? Or are we going to figure this out, listen to science, solve a very serious, dare I say, fatal problem, and set the stage for a life-blessing future? So I just ask you once again to confirm this commitment to take LA out of coal and move forward with technology in the right direction. Thanks.
Thank you. William Ernest Shunnerwork, and our last speaker is Aura Vasquez.
William Shunnerwork. Well, I watched you guys spend 3 years worth of transfer payments to get this done. I'm particularly worried when I hear about only 600 megawatts of gas, because that means we're giving up about 2 gigawatts of dispatchable power coming into Los Angeles. It could be very bad. My research for the last 40 years on renewable energy is it doesn't work, and it will never work. And the only reason the price of solar is coming down is because people are going broke like Solyndra went broke. And after all this stuff goes into the junk pile, we're going to end up worse off than burning coal, and we're going to have in-basin generation instead of downwind coal generation. And I've already got my portable generator.
All right. Thank you. Aura Vasquez.
Good afternoon. My name is Aura Vasquez. I'm here representing the Beyond Coal campaign and the Sierra Club. And I would like to first express my appreciation and thank the members of the Energy and Environment Committee and yourself, Chair Jose Wizard, for continuing showing a strong leadership on the clean energy future of LA. And this includes, as some people spoke earlier, an improved energy efficiency program, creating the largest urban rooftop solar program in the nation, and develop the Green Building Retrofit Ordinance, and also putting LA on the world map of the 5th city in the world to fight climate change by ending the contracts with coal. And as DWP moves beyond coal, we, the Sierra Club, agree that we must look at ending the IPP contract by 2025. Also looking at a flexible contract with IPP while exploring innovative, clean energy solutions like solar, energy efficiency, and wind power. So I urge you today to approve the transition to move forward with IPP and push DWP to invest in clean energy solutions that are affordable and accessible for all ratepayers. I know that I can count on you today to take the final steps in eliminating coal from LA energy portfolio once and for all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much, and I'm certainly always happy to hear and to witness the City of Los Angeles being the forefront and a pioneer in many issues, particularly in this one, where we are setting an example of how we could kick our coal habit when we see that only cars and trucks are the biggest, bigger than what we do as a city with our coal burning, are the biggest contributors to carbon pollution, and this is certainly historic. It's a huge act, and to have Vice President Gore validate the work we are doing is huge, and I do think this is a huge step for the city. I applaud DWP for the work you do on this, for the work you have done, for the work you will do on this, and certainly to all the advocates who have pushed and urged, and nothing happens in a bureaucracy unless there's momentum. It's simple physics, and the momentum comes from you who push the bureaucracy in a certain direction, so thanks to all of you. But the Dr. Pickles issues that he raises are very, have merit, and I think we all have an interest in getting the lowest cost energy to our consumers, and he is helping us get there. I would urge that DWP work with Dr. Pickle as we move forward. There's still a number of moving pieces to this to assure that we do get the best price possible for our consumers as we move forward. So I know you two will do that. And we've set an example, I think, with DWP being as transparent and open as possible with Dr. Pickle. He assures us of that, so that could only help all of us as we move forward with this. And so thanks to all of you. Questions, comments?
I think the time has come to vote.
All right, the time comes to vote. And so are there any objections? We'll approve this item to move forward with Mr. Carrast's recommendation. No objection? So moved. Thank you very much. Unanimous. Forthwith. Okay, next item.
Item number 4, Bureau of Sanitation report relative to preliminary implementation plan for an exclusive commercial multifamily solid waste franchise system.
Great, thank you. Now this is a joint committee between there's a joint meeting between the Energy and Environment Committee and the Ad hoc on Waste Reduction and Recycling Committee. All members are present, and Chair Alarcon is present as well from the Ad hoc on Waste Reduction and Recycling Committee. And at this point, I would ask staff to please come up and make their presentation. Mr. Zaldivar, I assume, and our Public Works President?
I actually will start. Thank you so much, Council Member Rizar. We appreciate you being here, and also like to acknowledge our other chair, Alarcon, Councilperson Alarcon. As you know, this is where the commissioners preside, so I said commissioners in error. And I'd like to also acknowledge our other council members that are here. As you stated, for the record, we're here to discuss the exclusive commercial multifamily solid waste franchise hauling system implementation plan, and this is one of many meetings. This is our third time here to discuss this matter with you. And as you stated, I'm president of the Board of Public Works, just for the record. And I'd like to thank a couple of our fine folks from the Bureau of Sanitation, and they've been working so diligently on this matter. Of course, we have Enrique Zaldivar that's seated right next to me. He's done a wonderful job. I'd like to also acknowledge Alex Elu, Karen Coca, Dan Myers, April Mancha, and Maricela Reyes. They've done just a wonderful job. And I'd like to just take a second to acknowledge my other commissioners. We have Commissioner Nutter, who's been working on this for 2 years. Commissioner Nutter, are you here? I do see him. And I also like to acknowledge Commissioner Mendoza in her absence. She's out doing something else environmentally friendly for the board at another meeting. But I'd like to just take this time also to acknowledge our new commissioner, our newest commissioner, Commissioner Furatani. Thank you so much for being here, sir. If you could just stand for a second, just so that folks can see you. As soon as they see who you are, then you'll have a load of meetings
Turn
coming.
around, do a 360.
Exactly. Take the credit, you're taking the blame. And we have 2 staff members that have helped us in a big way on this, Martin Slagater, and we have from CD12, we even have Nicole Burnson, that seem like they know more about trash than anything in this building. I'd like to just talk about our goals. We have 10 of them. Again, we're going to be moving forward, and I think this implementation plan will make it very clear that we've answered some of the questions and done some of the homework. I mean, the staff over at the Bureau of Sanitation has done a wonderful job. Zero waste and goals of our 90% diversion rate by 2025 is something that's in the plan in great detail. And we'll have staff talk to you a little bit more about that. Of course, meet and exceed the California environmental laws, improve health and safety for our solid waste workers, improve efficiency. This will be by reducing collection routes in many ways, and we can talk about how that was done as it relates to some of the mapping. And it went in our mapping meetings. We actually were really working hard to address those issues and to improve the air quality and meeting the.
1 second. Can everybody here in the back, Mr. Eck, can you hear us in the back?
Or Mr. Eck.
You could? Right here in the middle, you
Okay.
can? Maybe bring the microphone closer to you.
All
Yeah,
right,
thank
it's
you.
fine. I'm used to sitting in a different spot, so thank you so much. It's not too close? Okay, good. And then, of course, item number 6, I believe I was saying meet customer needs with our cutting-edge programs. And, of course, this will provide an opportunity for the customers to be served in a technological friendly manner. And so we'll be using some of the newest and greatest ways to serve those customers. In addition to that, create stabilized service fees. I know that was important for folks, and to foster long-term competition. The other 2 items are to ensure that we have sufficient staffing and to ensure reliable system infrastructure to make sure that we have uninterrupted service to customers. This is a process where we've had a chance to meet with a number of stakeholders, and some of those folks are actually here in the room. We've met with the Motion Picture Association. I know Commissioner Nutter and I have had a chance to meet with them and discuss their needs, and they are a part of the plan. I know that Councilmember LaBonge also had a number of concerns as it related to the motion picture industry. In addition to that, I just would like to acknowledge other folks that we've met with, of course, the hospitals, the small and large haulers, the apartment associations, as well as the business community. And even we are actually planning to meet with some of the churches in the area, but we've had a number of other stakeholder meetings where we had people from the religious communities come forward. I'd like to also thank Don't Waste LA, Lane, the Teamsters, NRDC, and a number of our other partners that are here, particularly our nonprofits. I believe Commissioner Nutter had a chance to meet with Midnight Mission as a result of our last implementation plan meeting. And so we're not where we want to be, but we're not where we used to be. We're still moving forward, and I think that the staff has just done a wonderful job in moving the ball forward on this item. And I'm going to turn it over to Enrique Zaldivar at this time.
Before the director speaks, Mr. Chair, I have a community meeting that I scheduled prior to my appointment to this community. It's out of the community prior to appointing this committee. If I could excuse myself, but also state that the issue of potential is that a correct contracts in certain areas that would meet the needs of specialty industries like the film industry or some large real housing would be an opportunity to be able to meet everyone's needs.
Correct.
Okay.
Specialty haulers for areas that require specialty
and,
needs.
for the community to excuse me, and Mr. Weezer and colleagues, I have to go to the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaBonge. So excused. Can your district send us a letter, please, noting your excusal?
I'm one of his constituents. I'll vouch for him. He's a great councilman.
Vouch that he was there.
Thank you, Commissioner Maddox. Enrique Zaldivar, Director of the Bureau of Sanitation. We are pleased to present the final implementation plan for an exclusive commercial and multifamily solid waste franchise hauling system. This plan was prepared at the direction of your committee and the full City Council on November 14, 2012. To proceed with the development of such a plan, including the consideration of 23 items in the adopted Energy and Ad hoc Waste Reduction Committee's report. In development of this report, a series of preliminary reports were prepared, which were discussed at a number of previous meetings, as you well know. Most recently, Sanitation held an open house to gather additional input on the development of the franchise zones and boundaries. A critical element of the final report is your consideration of the goals and the related recommendations. These goals mirror many of the needs expressed by the stakeholders, including waste holders, environmental organizations, business groups, and many of the other groups that Commissioner Maddox alluded to. And as much as our report is complete and thorough as we feel, there's just some minor clarification language that I would like to introduce into the record that we would then also cover that in your subsequent actions today. So let me just read them into the record as they are not reflected in our recommendations. Number one, adopt the following goals and actions for the exclusive commercial franchise system necessary to define the program. This is important for the CEQA process. Direct Sanitation to begin the development of a request for proposals. That's number two. Number three, direct Sanitation to complete the CEQA process. And number four, direct Sanitation to finalize the RFP as necessary upon Council consideration and approval of the CEQA process and related ordinance. With that, Mr. Chair and Honorable Council members, we would like to go over the specific recommendations that relate to each of the goals, and Alex Kalu is going to go over them.
Thank you, Enrique. Alex Halu, Bureau of Sanitation. Sanitation recommends the following program goals and actions. Goal number one, meet the city's zero waste goals as outlined in the Renew LA plan adopted by Council. 1A, by placing a blue bin recycling at minimum at every customer site. 1B is preserve existing organic waste separation and recycling program. 1C is offer green waste collection to all multifamily customers. And 1D is to include landfill disposal reduction targets in franchise agreements with accountability for performance, including liquidated damages. Goal number two is to meet and exceed state requirements for waste diversion and mandatory recycling. 2A is to phase in citywide organic diversion programs. 2B is to encourage through the RFP evaluation criteria proposers to exceed required targets in their proposals by including innovative programs and new technologies. Goal 3 is to improve health and safety for solid waste workers enforced by provisions in the franchise agreements. 3A is city certification and inspection of all facilities. 3B is the right to inspect facilities for compliance with appropriate rules and regulations. And 3C is required compliance with living wage ordinance provisions. And 3D is to require compliance with the service contract worker retention ordinance and the first source hiring ordinance. And E is to establish a city hotline for employee complaints and protection from retaliation for reporting problems. And finally, goal 4 is to improve efficiency of the city's solid waste system. A is to adopt the exclusive commercial franchise zone map with 11 zones. And 4B is to require routing efficiencies in the proposals and monitor vehicle mile traveled in the franchise agreements. And I'll turn it over to Karen Coca.
Good afternoon. Moving on with the proposed goals for the program. Number 5 is to improve the city's air quality. We think we can do that by one measure, requiring late model, low emission, clean fuel vehicles. We have to make sure that we are in full compliance with Rule 1193. Number 6 is provide the highest level of customer service. We think this is a critical item to make sure that the implementation of this program goes well. First, to require contractors to use all types of communication with their customers, call center, online, apps, whatever the easiest way to talk to your customers is, we will expect them to do. We will expect them to continually have extensive ongoing outreach programs and conversations with their customers. We are going to include customer needs such as hospitals, nonprofits, other organizations, and we're going to be talking to them through this process, other specialized services in the RFP, as well as the franchise agreements, as well as having continuing stakeholder involvement to make sure that we are fully comprehending all of the customer needs and making sure that their needs are met. We're going to provide access to customer service data at real time by sanitation to evaluate the performance and customer satisfaction by the haulers. We're also going to establish an alternative program for studios. We still need to refine this definition, which we will do in the near future, but with the following requirements: that they use one of the franchise haulers that is under agreement, that they meet all of the franchise requirements, including the waste diversion requirements, accurate reporting, payment of fees, and clean air vehicles, amongst others, whatever we are requiring in our franchise agreements of all, and requiring third-party auditing of their standards to make sure that they are meeting all the requirements that all the franchisees across the city are going to meet. Goal number 7 is to create a consistent, clearly defined system, fair and equitable rates, and have contingency plans to ensure reliable service. Again, another goal that's very important for this program. Our first recommendation is to include only a cost of living increase, which we are proposing to cap as well. In the franchise agreements, that will give stability to customers so that they know what their rates are going to be. There won't be any unexpected increases. Designate the uniform rate model as the preferred alternative. We will try to meet that. However, to allow sanitation to negotiate the best practical and achievable model, that's because we expect when we get the proposals in, we will be able to see just how close we can get for a uniform rate structure citywide. We also intend to require detailed contingency plans in each franchise agreement and requirements that they be updated annually. Contingency plans, our first thought that, of course, this could be expanded further, that they will include at a minimum backup provisions for each service zone, monetary penalties for a lapse in service, and through performance bonds, liquidated damages. Also, we want to exempt certain material types, again, from the exclusive commercial franchise system. And those items would include medical waste, hazardous waste, radioactive waste, pharmaceutical waste, construction and demolition debris, and any specialty waste such as fog that are handled under a different regulatory system.
Good afternoon, Dan Myers. Rounding out the goals, goal number 8 is to create a system that ensures long-term competition. We do this by requiring compliance with the city's business inclusion plan, including such things for MBE, WBE, OBE, DBE, EBE subcontracting goals. We would designate 3 small exclusive franchise zones geared towards small waste haulers and designate that no more than 49% of the service may be performed by any one company. Goal number 9 is to ensure sufficient staffing to meet the program goals. We would ensure this by continuing the AB 939 fee as currently adopted and designate a city franchise fee to achieve the city's fiscal goals. Our final goal, 10, is to ensure a reliable system infrastructure to provide uninterrupted service to customers. And we do this by providing for infrastructure development sufficient to manage the city's solid waste needs. Would also like to offer a quick timeline and milestones as we go through the process. The CEQA process has already began. It began in February of this year, 2013. The RFP process will begin upon the approval of this implementation plan. We anticipate that the final EIR will be completed in February 2014 for Council's consideration, and the franchise ordinance would be completed at the same time for Council's consideration, February 2014. Upon the approval of the ordinance and final EIR, the city will finalize its RFP, and we anticipate that be completed in April 2014, with contracts to be executed mid-2016, with service to begin in early 2017. And that completes our staff report.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments right now from committee members? We'll go to public comment and still have an opportunity afterwards. Mr. Chair?
First of all, let me commend staff for this entire process. You were all 20 years younger when you began this, and now you're 20 years older. Two concerns. With regard to the potential for displacement of workers, in the under category 3, to improve the health and safety for solid waste workers, is there any kind of provision that enables bidders to or proposers to indicate how they might contribute to reducing job displacement?
Well, that we would, of course, include the city's worker retention policies, but we would also, through the RFP process, encourage proposals to include, as part of our evaluation, how they would support not only the retention of existing workers, but what we're hoping to see through this process is new infrastructure and new jobs there. Okay. So job creation and job retention we anticipate to be part of the proposal process.
Okay, so the worker retention provision policies of the city already would essentially are a part of the RFP process.
That's what we're proposing, yes, to include in the RFP.
Okay, thank you. The second question I had is related to you know my thoughts on the uniform rate policy.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
not crazy about it because I think depending on where you're picking up the trash and where you're taking it to, it makes a big difference in cost. But I'm trying to visualize this. Are you talking about establishing a basic rate and then the haulers justifying additions to that rate, depending on geography, depending on product and other factors? I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to... I think you're really tying the hands of the haulers by asking for a uniform rate. And I also don't think it's fair to the general public, where some people live right next door to a landfill. I don't think they should pay the same as somebody who lives far away from a landfill and their trash has to be hauled a lot further. So I don't know exactly how to visualize this uniform rate. I do appreciate the addition of the language that you would negotiate the best practical, achievable uniform rate. I get that, but I just want to have one last dig at it.
Yes, council member. When we talk about a uniform rate, there are several advantages to it for both the public, the customers, for the city as well. We do recognize that it will be driven by the request for proposals process and the negotiation process. It's very difficult to tell just how close or far away the proposals will be when we actually receive them. There are several avenues we can use to regularize the rates if possible, through negotiation, through potential bundling of zones. There's several ways and techniques that can be used, but it's very difficult to predict if we will be able to do that. But as far as the uniform rates, there's several advantages to it. It makes it simpler for the customers, no matter if they have a business on one side of town and another side of town. Also, where you would draw the boundaries for the different rates. You might have people on one side of the street have a different rate than the other side of the street, and I would imagine that would cause issues. It's also easier for administration for the folks who have to actually run the program. We get a customer complaint, we have any calls, we have a single rate structure to refer to when we're talking about the level of service that they're being provided. So there's a lot of advantages to it. We do acknowledge it may not be able to be achieved, but we still believe that it is a goal that we should be striving for.
Okay,
If I may add also, actually, Councilman, a couple of years ago, the council have voted for a new LA plan. And this process allows us a paradigm shift from disposal at landfill. You're absolutely correct if we only base it on disposal. In this process, what we are looking for is increasing recycling, which is 1. 2, increasing diversion. And 3 is placing new facilities where organic material that's currently represent about 40% of our waste stream that's heading to the landfill to be taken out. So technically what we would like to see in this process is a lot of the organic material heading to Sunshine Canyon and other local landfills to be taken out, recycled, being used as compost and beneficially. Those facilities might be located in other parts of the city, and so it really behooves us to wait till the RFP comes back with the numbers, and we'll be able to look at the balancing, what is the material going to be going to, but we are really following what you and the rest of the council have set for us, which is reduce the amount of trash going to landfill, and this is really our goal number 1 in this process.
Yeah, I think those are very smart answers. I still believe that given the diversity of our city and the demographics, that it's going to be very difficult for us to have a uniform rate. But having said that, the additional languages give you the ability to consider the RFPs, well, what we get in terms of pricing and the reality of trying to get to a uniform price. I'm comfortable with that, but I just want to mention that I'm still skeptical about it. And then finally, I just wanted to make a comment and inform my colleagues that I had the opportunity to go to San Jose last week and visit the MRF at Newby Island, which is run by Republic, which is the single provider of service in San Jose. First of all, I would encourage all of you to visit, if not that MRF, other MRFs that have very high standards in terms of how they separate the trash. And the one thing that was an eye-opener was the capacity of the MRF, as well as the high technology involved in the MRF, the cleanliness of it, and the high degree of separation they were able to achieve. Now their diversion rate has jumped from 20% to over 70%, which is an amazing accomplishment. San Jose is a very different city. It is unique in some respects, and certainly not comparable to Los Angeles in many respects. But I think the most important thing that was an eye-opener to me was that the extent of our ability to achieve the highest possible diversion rate has everything to do with our ability to establish high-tech MRFs. Without that capability, we're greatly restricting our ability to achieve higher diversion rates. So I hope that my colleagues understand that when we see cities like San Jose achieving a 70% diversion rate in a year, from 20% to 70%, that unless we have a rigorous focus on diversion as our primary goal, and not deviate from that primary goal, and see massive infusion of investment into establishing very expensive MRFs, of which we would need 5 times of what San Jose has at $40 million. We're not going to achieve the same kind of diversion. So I would encourage you to be disciplined and focused on the issue of diversion as the primary driving factor here. And I would also, again, encourage you to visit some of these other MRFs because there's a distinct difference in terms of the quality of how they're operated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We want to be pro-business. At the same time, we want this diversion. So we don't want to harm the business environment here in Los Angeles, and we want to be pro-business to help them. You mentioned hospitals, because I had concern about the hospitals. That matter is going to be addressed at a later time, I understand. There's some concern about the documentation that they dispose of and other hazardous type materials, so that matter will be addressed specifically.
Yes, Council Member. We have spoken numerous times with the hospital associations and have visited many hospitals, and we will incorporate their needs for service and make sure that those are met in our agreements.
Because that, obviously, if it goes to a MRF, it has to be separate from the other.
That's correct. Their regular municipal solid waste is already separated from their specialty waste and their hazardous waste, and so it's only the municipal solid waste that we would be dealing with.
And the other, they would be able to deal with whatever they wish.
That is correct.
Okay. The local haulers, when we talk about the ability to hire locally, help local businesses, how many local haulers do we have in Los Angeles, established in Los Angeles?
We have approximately 150 of the traditional permitted waste haulers operating in the city.
How many are established in the city? Their headquarters, their facilities are in Los Angeles.
I'm sorry, I don't have that number.
That we need to find out. My concern is that we don't take local businesses out of business, and if we have a business that's established in Los Angeles, that we have some type of priority to include them in the process. I don't know how many we have, but it concerns me that we need to take care of the businesses that have established here in the city of Los Angeles. They have to comply with all the rules, regulations, et cetera, but we need to have some respect for those that are already established here in LA. And again, I don't know how many, but that's a concern that I have. Yes.
Could I ask you to clarify?
Well, in other words,
when you say businesses that are established here,
haulers, the waste haulers, the refuge haulers.
That are providing service, or that
No,
are
that they're headquartered here in Los Angeles.
or that are creating city jobs?
No, number one, establish their facilities, they store their trucks, they occupy out of the city of Los Angeles. They're not coming up from Long Beach, they're not coming up from another part of the county, but they actually here paying taxes, business tax, et cetera. However they hire the folks, that's up to them, obviously, but the fact is that they're established. Their headquarters and their operations are out of Los Angeles. Again, I don't know how many there are. How many of the current haulers are union? Because we talk about complying with those particular aspects. How many of the current haulers that we have in operation are union operations?
I don't have that answer.
Okay, we need to find that out. How many MRFs do we have here in the city of Los Angeles?
A lot of numbers.
I thought we did research on this. I know there's one in the valley. See, we need to find this information out. What I don't want to see happen is our businesses relocate to other communities. Somehow we need to establish and help those. I'll give you that example. We talked many times about car dealers, where we used to have 150, and then we got down to 50, and all of a sudden we decided let's eliminate the gross receipts tax to bring them back to LA. What I don't want to see is more businesses leave Los Angeles. We need to keep them here and somehow analyze that. That should be part of the equation. The other one,
Are you saying you want a MRF in your district?
well, my district's going to end the end of June, so. And so will yours. No, I'll tell you about a MRF. And I don't remember where it was, but I went to a MRF that was state of the art, where the trucks pulled in, the door had closed. I went through the facility. It was absolutely immaculate. And it's not in the United States, but they have some MRFs that are just absolutely state of the art. I didn't go on Greg Smith's tour when he started inspecting those. Maybe some of you did. But they have state of the art MRF facilities where they're clean. They don't disrupt anything. There's no pollution. There's no odor, nothing. I personally witnessed that, so I was extremely impressed with that. The other question, we talk about improved health and safety for the workers, and then we talk about city hotline for employee complaints, etc. Who's going to handle that? What staff is going to be handling that? That's on page 2. So it talks about improve health and safety for solid waste workers, and we also talk about establish a city hotline. Who's responsible to handle that, and where are the personnel going to be handling that, or are we going to hire more people to do that part?
Is our anticipation that as we go through this process, we'll be developing further staffing needs, but as detailed in the document, our goal is to establish a team of inspectors that would go out and inspect these facilities. The hotline would be part of that inspection team. So what we want to do is if there's a problem with health and safety or other items that they think the material's not being diverted the way it's supposed to, we want the workers to be able to call us and also be protected if they call, because we want to be able to respond quickly to those complaints. So they would be contacting the inspection staff at that time.
So do we have an inspection staff now?
We do not have an inspection staff at this time.
That'd be another section within sanitation?
That is still part that we're going to be developing as we continue through the development process, is to identify what resources are needed.
And does that come out of the budget for sanitation, another section within sanitation and budgeted within the city budget?
It would be another section within sanitation, Councilman Enrique Zaldivar, the Director of Sanitation, and so it would function within sanitation. Until we have a better sense of what the extent of the enforcement activity is going to be, we don't have an idea of how much staff that would be. But it would be budgeted from the fees from this program, from the franchise fee.
And that would be part of it, and then the rest would go into the general fund?
Yes, so conceivably, this initiative has two pieces to it. There's a franchise fee, which is general fund eligible, and then there's the program fee, AB 939 fee, which is what we have now. So the general fund piece would be the franchise fee.
Okay, so the questions I asked, if we can get a report back on those, have answers to those questions that I previously asked.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kretz?
Thank you. First off, I want to compliment everyone involved for extensive outreach to stakeholders that I've heard about in the last few weeks. I've gotten a lot of compliments about your efforts, so I wanted to acknowledge that. One issue that I've mentioned a few times in passing, and I want to hit with a little more clarity, deals with our waste stream. For example, I don't know if there are plans to include in the RFP explanations of a bidder's plans to deal with problems like e-waste. My office has received reports of electronic waste being collected, disassembled, sold, and the toxic remaining, not very valuable parts being dumped into the ocean. Obviously, if we set up that kind of recycling program without the right oversight, and that continues to happen, it's not not a good thing for the environment. It's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do. And that's why right now, while we're overhauling our waste system, it seems like we should ask for in the RFP a specific map of where each type of recycling is going. If it's going to China and getting burned, we need to know that. And if it's getting dumped into the ocean, we need to know that and make sure that we eliminate any of those bad business practices which can seriously cause damage to the planet. Can the Bureau ensure that? Have we been looking at those more complicated and difficult issues?
Councilman, we have been looking at the interrelationship with many of the things that are related to solid waste, which of course includes some of the most, hazardous pieces and streams of solid waste, including e-waste. Councilmember Weezer has been dealing with Exide facility for battery recycling as an example, and the enforcement and the oversight of that kind of activity. We want to have and intend to have a bigger role on that. It's just that it involves so many other jurisdictions. The idea is that we have some idea from cradle to grave of all of the waste generated, recycled, disposed, the manifests that go with it. The global market being what it is, some of this stuff moves around the world, whether it's cardboard being exported to the Far East, that scrap metal moves and goes to the Far East. So it's truly a global economy in this side of the business as well. We will do more as part of this integration of the private side of solid waste with what we do on the public side. And so the answer is that we intend to do more.
Well, more still might not be enough. And the fact is, we go through the whole recycling process. It's obviously to do some positive things for the planet. If we have plastics and we're not landfilling them here, we feel a little better about what we're doing in Los Angeles. But if they're burning them in China, it's not really that much of a net gain for the environment. It's more something that makes you look at what we're doing and say, why even bother if it's not going to have the kind of results we want? So I would just, for the record, say enforcement of those things and every other piece of enforcement is my critical concern in this whole process. And the moment I think we're not doing the enforcement adequately, I stop being a supporter of this whole process. We have to do it in terms of our recycling. We have to do it in terms of our customer service, or our business people that are involved in this especially will truly not have been handled appropriately, because we've assured them that customer service will be as good as what they're dealing with now, and it probably should be better. We have to be focused on the safety of our workers, and all of these things need to require as much enforcement and inspection as it needs to do it right, whatever the costs may be. For this system to work, enforcement in every piece of it has to be done to the full extent necessary. And I want to hear that we've really thought that through and that we're prepared to do that at each piece of the process.
We will be prepared to do that. We're not prepared now, but we will as we develop the RFP and the custody relationships with regards to how the waste streams are moving, not only from the collection point, but to the processing center, to the final user in the global economy. And so we intend to do that, Councilman. We will not be able to tell you right now to what extent that means in terms of resources and in terms of the reach of that kind of enforcement. I mean, would we be traveling to, say, to China to inspect a facility? Chances are that we will, once a year or so.
Okay. What about our arrangements with the studios? I wonder if you could speak in more detail about how we've resolved that. Because I do have concerns. Runaway production is already disastrous. We don't want to do anything to lose customers on the lots of the studios. And, I'm aware of problems that studios have had with some of their haulers in the past. So where are we now on that?
So what we are proposing for the studios, first of all, that they be compliant with all of the requirements of the franchise model, meaning that they utilize a franchisee hauler, but that we recognize the uniqueness of their business and that they have in-studio shoots as well as on-location shoots, and that interdependency between the two is very fluid and can change very quickly. They may be shooting a movie in the studios for 1 day, 2 days, and quickly have to go out on location and back and forth. They need the ability to move all of the train that goes with production with them without being restricted to, well, are we in Zone A or in Zone B? We recognize that that's very unique to the studios in that they do both on-site and on location. So we're proposing that they be required to use a franchisee hauler, but that they be given the freedom to choose any of the franchisee haulers, not anyone that corresponds to any of the zones that they may happen to be on any given day. So they will have the ability to move that hauler to wherever they go in the city.
I think that's a good compromise. Hopefully that will work to the benefit of everybody on that one. A little bit on preference for haulers that are currently operating in Los Angeles. I know that's sort of a double-edged sword because we may have haulers with better practices and abilities that are not currently in the city of Los Angeles. How are we looking at that issue now? Where are we coming down on that?
As of right now, we do not recognize or are proposing a local headquarter preference, if you will. Clearly, we believe that the know-how and the expertise of the area and the customers will show itself in their proposal. So in that regard, they will have the ability to know the city well because they've been here and have been operating here and the needs of the customers. So we believe that will give them an edge with regards to being able to propose better. But as it stands right now, we're not recommending a local business preference.
And we've had a lot of discussions of the zones and the maps, and some folks have said 11 zones are too many, others 11 zones are too few. What's our current thinking in terms of the ability of a qualified hauler that's a small to medium hauler to participate in this plan with the current 11 zones? How's that work?
We believe that 3 of the zones for sure are of a size that would be of a competitive reach for the small to the medium hauler, and it could be as many as 4. The 4th zone is small enough that it's also within the capacity of the smallest of our haulers or medium-sized haulers. So we believe that that provides ample opportunity for the small haulers to be competitive.
Do we allow for proposals where 2 or 3 small haulers might get together and do a zone, or does it have to be just one company in each zone?
Joint ventures would be accepted, and we believe that those can happen, and we believe they are going to happen, where the 2 smaller haulers join forces and make a joint venture. Or one acquires the other, which can also happen before the proposals are out.
Thank you.
Mr. Krikorian?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And first, let me just echo everyone's comments about the tremendous work that staff has done on this. We've come a long way, and you know that I had a lot of concerns about this policy at the beginning, and we've come, I think, very far to a really workable plan. I want to make a couple of broad comments and ask a few more specific questions. First, I think, well, let me start with my agreement with Mr. Koretz on enforcement of the actual recycling of recyclables, because I honestly could not possibly care less about diversion from landfills for its own sake. To me, that's not the principal environmental objective that we have here. The principal environmental objective we have is reducing damage to our air quality, reducing the mining and other steps that are necessary to gain the commodities that are used, encouraging reuse and recycling so that we reduce the amount of consumption of materials. That's what matters here, not taking stuff out of the landfills. If we take stuff out of the landfills and burn them in China, we're causing more harm to the environment in Los Angeles than if we'd put it in the landfills. So this is essential to the merit of this policy. This policy is pointless if we're not doing that. So I want to make sure I'm as clear as I can be on that. Mr. Alarcon and Mr. Zine both raised important points about MRFs. Not just the quality of our MRFs, but the quantity of our MRFs is going to be essential to the environmental benefit of this policy. And frankly, under our current MRF structure, I still question whether there is environmental benefit to this policy. I question whether there is air quality benefit to this policy if we're still hauling to the same MRFs that we're hauling to now. Unless we have more MRFs in more council districts throughout this city, we're still going to have the same number of trucks running the same distance across town as we do now. So if we're going to make this policy work, and I believe it can work, we're going to have to, as a city, be committed to expanding the number of MRFs so that there are shorter hauls from pickup to sorting throughout the city. And so Mr. Alarcon and the 6th district and my district aren't, and Mr. Huizar's district as well, aren't adversely impacted by having all of the city's trash coming through our streets. We just have to expand the number of MRFs and the quality and the technological modernity of these MRFs. And their capacity, yeah, that's right. So those are a couple of overall comments. Now, in terms of the number of zones, this is, I think, this is one of the hardest questions that I know you've had to wrestle with in figuring out what's the sweet spot for the marketplace, for efficiency of operations and everything else. And I don't know if anybody knows what is the exact sweet spot number of the number of zones. But because I think that that's directly relevant to the environmental efficiency that's achieved in this policy, I do think that it's important that through the EIR process, as the lead agency under CEQA, that the Bureau evaluate 11 zones versus a greater number of zones, for example. And I'm assuming that in the CEQA process there will be commenters on our EIR who will question whether a different number of zones should be used. I would ask that the Bureau carefully analyze from an environmental perspective the number of zones, because it's going to go directly to trip reduction and reduction of miles. The number of zones that we have dictates whether we're going to reduce the number of truck miles or increase the number of truck miles. And so I think that that has to be analyzed carefully from an air quality perspective, from a impact on our streets perspective, and everything else. The rates stuff, I think we still have a ways to go on that, so I'll defer further discussion about that. I tend to agree with Mr. Alarcon, but I do see that there's some advantage in getting closer to a unitary rate. I just question whether we can really effectively do that and meet the needs of the marketplace. But we'll hold that one until we see what you come up with further down the road. Now, on the studio issue, my first concern is actually increased because of your response to Mr. Kretz's questions with regard to on-location shoots. It had been my understanding that the direction we were going in was that on-location disposition of trash would be exempted from this policy or treated as though it were C&D or in some other way excluded from the need to have a franchised hauler. And I personally think that that is important, that on-location shoots be carved out of this, in part because we're going to have production companies coming in, hopefully, if we can start attracting production to this town again, we're going to have production companies coming from outside who may not have an existing contract with a franchised hauler, who are going to be doing on-location shoots in the city of Los Angeles. There's going to be all kinds of complications that are going to come from trying to shoot on location at all different parts of the city in all 11 zones. I just think that should be carved out entirely. The on-studio needs are unique, and for those, I think that this has been well addressed by having the studios have the opportunity to contract with any franchised hauler. But on-location shooting is an entirely different matter than on-studio production of trash. So I think it should be carved out entirely.
Mr. Gregorian, on that question, I believe it only applies to the studios, not to outside production companies in terms of...
That's what I had expected.
Right.
Okay.
It applies in as much as we don't have a clear definition, but it applies to the physical entity that can be called a studio. So for the on-site, for the on-location shoots, you are correct in that we had stated that much of their waste stream is C&D, construction and demolition, the takedowns, the wood, and all the other stuff. So to a large extent, they would be exempted on that basis. To the extent that they also have, and they do, have things like food waste and other stuff that is generated on location. They will not, under our proposal, there's an interrelationship between the studio, the on-site, and the on-location that causes us to believe that it's best that both be not included in the franchise model, and instead they be given the freedom and the ability to choose from any of the haulers for both places.
Okay.
If you follow me.
I kind of don't, because if that's the case, then, when they're doing an on-location shoot, somebody in the production crew is going to have to be responsible for saying, okay, well, that's C&D waste, so that's going to go over in the C&D pile, and that's something else that's going to have to go be picked up by our franchised hauler. So we're going to have two haulers come and pick up the waste. I think on-location should just be entirely exempt.
I have to say, I asked a specific question yesterday in my office with public works staff, and it's my understanding that the requirement to use a franchise hauler only applies to the major studios that have an actual location.
On the studio? For pickup on the studio?
No, for the location shooting. For the studios. But if it's another production company that comes in, they're not the this program does not apply. They're exempt. That's how I understood it. Am I
For the
incorrect?
for the C&D, construction and demolition.
But that would be the case for anyone. C&D is already
Correct.
exempt from this throughout the city. So it doesn't meet the needs of this critically important industry and the unique needs of location shoots if we're just saying that they're going to be treated like anybody else with regard to C&D. I don't know. I'm not seeing how that works for location shooting, and I don't see why I mean, the point of having special treatment of the studios was because of the physical nature of studios. The fact that you have sound stages that are on schedules, that have, noise restrictions, that you have narrow streets, that you have a need for urgent pickup of large amounts of trash on a, odd hour basis. All of those sorts of things are unique to studios, the physical studio. But film production on location is an entirely different thing. And I just don't know how that's going to be manageable to have a single motion picture, a single episode of a television show might have location shoots in all 11 of these zones. So it's going to get just very impossible, to Mr. Kretz's point about enforcement and everything else. I just think that becomes almost unmanageable. And my concern would be, again, I think that particular category of business ought to be exempt. That's my view.
Yeah, the problem with that is that if you exempt them out of the franchise system, it makes it difficult to track where their waste is going. So it actually works as a counter effect to the goal you're seeking on the environmental stuff.
But
so
if most of the waste is C&D anyway, it
the
already is
C&D,
going to be outside of
the
the...
C&D is already exempt.
Right. So what we're proposing, Councilman, does provide for what you're saying, that their ability to not be restricted to how they're going to move around their production throughout the city. They will be able to do that and not worry about whether they're crossing boundaries between hauler zones. They will choose a hauler of their choosing among the franchisees. That's that's part of the franchise system that we require and that they do. But beyond that, they will be free to choose and move.
And I think that was their main concern, was just to have that choice. And so we put that alternative program, well, that alternative program's in there.
Yes, it is. They have the ability to move around unrestricted.
Okay. So just for clarity then, if a studio chooses franchisee A, that franchisee goes and picks up all their location trash wherever it may be produced anywhere
Correct.
in the city. Well, that's a little better, but I still have some... my preference would be to exempt it entirely. Let me get more back to the studios. In the recommendations and in your discussion of them, we talked about the studios being held to the same diversion standards and so on. And I'm a little confused by the language of that, because in that case we're imposing upon the business customer these requirements as opposed to the hauler. If they are choosing among franchised haulers, we already expect that franchised hauler to meet those standards. So there should be no additional burden on the studios, correct? Because we're already, if they're choosing a franchised hauler,
correct,
that franchised hauler must qualify under all of the standards that we've established, under all of the, AB 939 fee issues, the franchise fee issues, their reporting standards, all the accounting standards that we're setting up to apply to the haulers would already apply because it's a franchised hauler, right?
That's correct.
There should be no additional burden on the studio itself as the business customer of that hauler, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, there's pieces in which it's a matter of us ensuring that the agreement between the hauler and the studio remains in tune with the recycling goals. We were very impressed with the culture of recycling that already exists in the studios. It's, in fact, they're to be commended because they are true pioneers, and we actually learned some best practices from them just in the last 6 months. So that culture exists with the studios already. We simply want to have an ability to check with the studios and the hauler. The requirement to provide clean air trucks, for example, that's on the hauler. That's not at all on the studio as a customer to ensure that they're using clean fuel trucks. That's on the hauler and us. We're not going to burden the studios with that. It's really more where should it ever be the case where a studio reverses course from their current culture of recycling and say, you know what, I no longer want to recycle and do any of this separation stuff. Let's put it all in one bin and haul it out to the landfill. We simply want to have checkpoints in which we ensure that that's not happening. We're not saying it will.
But it can't, because they're already using under this proposal, they're already using a franchised hauler. So the franchised hauler has the obligation to meet those standards, not the business. I mean,
Well,
the studio shouldn't be treated any differently than a restaurant or a hardware store or anything else, and we're not imposing those burdens on those businesses.
Yeah, it's just annual check times in which we're going to come in and sit down with the studios and the hauler. It's not any kind of imposition of any additional requirements. It's just a check. That's all we're saying we will do. But if, I mean...
I'm missing it. I don't understand. This is the only class of businesses in the entire city of Los Angeles, then, that are going to be checked as businesses. In every other case, we're going to be ensuring compliance by ensuring that the franchisee is in compliance, not the business. So what am I missing?
We can relax the, that we had said in a recommendation that we would do an annual audit. That's all we're saying we will do. One annual audit of their practices. And because they will be largely outside of the franchise system, not entirely, just largely, that's the only checkpoint we're asking that be put in place.
But see, I guess that's where I'm having the difficulty. It's an alternative kind of franchise relationship, but it's still within the franchise framework, because their only choice under this alternative policy is choosing a franchised hauler. They can't choose some new hauler, right? I mean, that was my original thought.
We
that
can
they
check.
should be able to hire whoever they
we
want.
can
But
do
if
the audits through the hauler, Councilman. We can do the audits through the hauler.
As long as it's enforced through the hauler, that's my only concern. I don't think there should be any additional burden on these businesses more than any other businesses in the city. And everyone is contracting with a hauler, so it should be enforced.
We will do the audits through the hauler.
Okay. And then the final point that I have is major studios are recommended for this alternative proposal. I don't know if we have created a definition yet for what that means, but as that evolves, I'd like to know what's encompassed within that, and maybe you could work with my office in helping to put a finer point on that definition.
Actually, the primary distinction is the ones that do shoot off of their main studio, and because like Raleigh, for example, their production is on site for the most part. They rent their studio.
Well, it's a rental studio, so it's a different nature.
So
of
that's
thing.
the key separation.
Okay. Well, that's something I'll want to
Yes, we need to work on the definition. There's no question about that.
Okay, so all of that discussion shouldn't be seen as detracting from my initial comments that this has really come a long way, and terrific job by staff. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now go to public comment, and then we'll come back for more questions and comments from our colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Zhang. We have a number of speakers, so if you would want to keep your comments short, it would be greatly appreciated. We'll start off with, I will name 3 speakers, and if you could all have the speaker come up and the 2 people behind him so that we could hear from them, so we could be ready to go. Sarah Walsh, Dove Asarnault, and Ruben Gonzalez.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Walsh, and I'm here on behalf of the Motion Picture Association of America. First, I just want to thank Chairman Huizar and all the committee members and board members who have met with us, as well as Enrique Zaldivar and the Bureau staff for involving us in the process and recognizing the uniqueness of our operations. I do need to address Councilman Krikorian's question about the on-location filming. It has been our understanding, based on previous Bureau reports, that all on-location filming is considered temporary for obvious reasons, and that it would therefore be considered construction and demolition, all of it. this is an issue because it gets to our other member companies who are not located in the city, but obviously do filming in the city. So if you're a Warner Brothers production or a Sony production, and you may have your own hauler, obviously in Burbank or Culver City, are you then now required to use one of the franchised haulers when you're in the city? So you could be filming in the city, then going out to Santa Clarita. How is that addressed? So I think this maybe needs some further clarification. We use specialty haulers for our on-location work that have small trucks and can move bins easily out of neighborhoods. It's a completely different operation than the studio operation, so I think that needs to be addressed by these committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you, council members. My name is Doug Arsenault of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. VIGA asked that the alternative analysis study include the establishment of 20 zones in order to ensure local business owners receive the highest level of customer service. Several industries, including the motion picture industry, require special attention from their waste haulers who understand the nature of their business and are capable of meeting those unique needs. These industries include restaurants, historic high-rise buildings, studios, as well as hospitals. The city has a responsibility to ensure that no waste shed is so large and unmanageable that it cannot be appropriately serviced. The currently proposed 11 zones are simply insufficient to ensure the necessary level of accountability. We also strongly believe that subcontracting is a necessary element. As this exclusionary system is set to leave many small family-owned haulers out in the cold, the city must provide real opportunities for these businesses to remain in operation if they comply with the city's environmental regulations. This will ensure reasonable customer service, provide for the unique needs of businesses within larger zones, and create options for these small, independently owned waste haulers to retain some level of competitiveness in the Los Angeles Basin.
Thank you.
The greater Los Angeles Basin. We urge the council to support inclusion of these recommendations in the alternative analysis. The system must be fair to all Angelinos rather than a vocal minority of special interests. Creating a wasteland for LA business is wasting
Thank
LA.
you.
Thank you.
Mr. Arsenault,
There's a question.
Mr. Arsenault, I have a question. Would VICA's position change if the 11 district system ensured lower costs to the businesses?
It would depend on what the full proposal was. Okay?
So it might change if the cost would be lower for business with 11 districts versus 20.
I would have to talk to our board and our president about that. Okay? Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ruben Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ruben Gonzalez. I'm speaking on behalf of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. We'd like to thank sanitation and their fine staff for engaging the business community in this discussion. However, those discussions with sanitation staff have raised, much like the conversation here, more questions than answers, and have shown that this proposal is not ready for prime time. When you have to put together a patchwork of exemptions to meet a variety of different needs of different industries, from the movie studios to groceries to commercial to apartments, it's not ready for prime time. Realize what we're doing here. The City of Los Angeles is creating 11 enormous monopolies, and it takes a very intricate system to enforce rules and make sure customer service is sound, make sure that rates are sound, make sure that you're actually meeting the goals of these monopolies, because if left unattended, if left unaccountable, they will not reach the goals. At a minimum, this EIR needs to look at many more zones than 11, because at least smaller monopolies will be more controllable and more accountable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next three speakers are Lawrence Dupsar, or Dupson, Robert Spurgeon, and Yegig Kashishian.
Hello, my name is Larry Dobson. I'm the Director of Environmental Services at California Hospital Medical Center, a member of Dignity Health, located at downtown LA, Grand Avenue in Venice. While we very much are in support of the principles of the plan, we cannot support the business recommendations to include. We have been actively working to remove barriers and streamline our processes. As the largest safety net provider in this community, every penny counts to keep our doors open. Healthcare waste is complex and our waste management needs are unique. For an example, current in-house process renders hazardous waste non-infectious, allowing California Hospital Medical Center to dispose of its red bags along with solid waste. We work closely with our hauler, extensively training the vendors as well as our staff. We have built a strong relationship over time. We are very concerned that the city's haulers will not be able to properly identify and dispose of the infectious waste. Any unnecessary changes we fear will create inefficiencies and increase our costs, which we simply cannot afford. Not when our intense focus must be on patient care and quality and the successful implementation of health repair.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Chairman Huizar, Alarcon, members of the committee, staff, thank you very much. In February, I shared with you a letter from Healthcare Without Harm, an international group of healthcare professionals and other organizations who advocate passionately for an environment of care that is clean, non-toxic, and safe. In that letter were specific concerns about the impact of the exclusive franchise on hospitals and health facilities in the city of Los Angeles, and why the unique nature of hospitals demands a different approach than the one-size-fits-all service common among such franchises. Each of you have been sensitive to the unique needs of hospitals and have specified that the city staff address these concerns. The Bureau of Sanitation has indicated that they will address those concerns through the RFP and standards in the contractual agreements. The Bureau's report, however, lacks clarity and specificity as to how those needs will be addressed and if there will be special provisions for hospitals. My request is that specific RFPs be developed that address all of the service, standards, and cost concerns that we have shared with you over these many months, and that hospitals in each franchise zone would have the opportunity to participate in the development of those standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon. Yara Kashishian with the Central City Association of Los Angeles. As you define the parameters of the EIR, we ask that this joint committee study up to 20 zones in the CEQA alternative study. Los Angeles is a diverse economy, and the needs of its individuals' businesses are complex. It is neither in the interests of the business community nor the city to have waste sheds become so large that they are unmanageable, because ultimately service levels will suffer. Recently, we've learned that the Department of Sanitation's report for today is being proposed as a final document intended for adoption. Respectfully, we are nowhere near the point of beginning the RFP preparation process. The environmental process is just beginning. We ask that you therefore ensure that the EIR study include a number of alternatives, including the 20-zone alternative we've requested today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next three speakers are Jason Harriton, Nicole Shahinian, and Santiago Chambers.
Thank you, Council and Board. My name is Jason Harriton. I'm here representing Sunset Gower and Sunset Bronson Studios in Hollywood, representing 1 million square feet of studio facilities, representing 23 stages, purpose-built stages here in Los Angeles for film and television use. We're the largest independent studio in the United States, employing about 3,500 union guild members on the campuses at any given time. As you can imagine, trash hauling, as has been said by the council, is a bit of air traffic control in our business. So it is important for us to note that we currently do exceed, as was said by the council member, exceed the diversion rates that have been talked about. We've trained for about a year and hired specific vendors that then hire specific employees to deal with our needs. So we thank you for taking the time to address that we are a unique user. Personally, as a member of the Producers Guild of America's Green Committee and overseeing the recycling at the studio campuses, both personally and professionally, I can say that it's very important that the studios, both independent and major, be included in the carve-out that takes into consideration the unique needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon, Nicole Shahinian with the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber continues to believe that quality of service is directly related to competition. With competition among vendors removed from the proposed exclusive system, the Chamber asks that the Council do all it can to ensure that there are adequate procedures in place to address problems that arise between waste service providers and the businesses they will be serving. Many businesses require special attention from their waste haulers who understand business operation needs and are capable of meeting the unique needs of certain businesses. It's critical that LA businesses receive a high level of customer service, and one way to ensure this is to make sure that no one-way shed is too large and unmanageable to be properly serviced. We understand and support the city's policy goals, but want to see them happen in the most efficient way possible, and there is no question that a system with the maximum number of zones is best. The Chamber remains particularly concerned with the studios and the hospitals and ask that there are exemptions made for these two particular businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Santiago Chambers. I'm here with Children's Hospital Los Angeles. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Mr. Alarcon for his tireless advocacy for child pedestrian safety with the LA Street Smarts Richie's Neighborhood Program. We thank you for that, sir. We heard a lot of discussion about the studios. We're not filming Grey's Anatomy. We live it. We're taking care of some of the most seriously injured and ill children in the world. We can't afford to have people telling us who we can use. We can't dial robo numbers. We need to be able to call people who can respond to us immediately. With all due respect, please consider the unique nature and operations of hospitals. They are unlike any in the world. If you expose untrained professionals or people to our environment, it could put them in danger. I really encourage you to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next three speakers, Chip Clements, Reverend Bob Gay, and Kobe King.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, staff, Chip Clements from Clements Environmental. Two comments. One, in regards to what Councilman Alarcon and Krikorian said about our MRFs. I think the MRFs are absolutely critical for us to achieve the diversion we want. And we have some now that are in expansion in the city and some new ones that are being developed. We work on some of those. But I think the plan should include the MRFs as an option to the Blue Can source separation program. There are instances in our businesses and multifamily where it's hard to do source separation, so we should list MRFs as an option, and that's how we're going to achieve these super high diversion levels. One other point, I also agree with some of the other speakers and Councilman Zine also saying how can we protect our local hauling businesses. I think we need more small zones, and what I was suggesting is to take each large zone and put one small zone in there, so that would be 8 more small zones along with the 3 that we already have. They'd be distributed around the city. It'd be easy for the small haulers to service those, and I think that would give our local guys a much better shot to compete. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Reverend Bob Gay, I appeared both other times when you were discussing this subject. When I was here last time, there was a directive from this committee for staff to meet with synagogues, churches, community care facilities, skilled nursing facilities, convalescent homes. We scheduled a meeting, and give credit to Commission President Capri Maddox, we scheduled a meeting for next Wednesday to hold that kind of session. And what has occurred today is that I was informed before the start of this meeting is that this issue is likely to be voted on today, passed, and then scheduled for council next Wednesday. So the very groups that have not been included, even though the staff is to be admired for having met with very large stakeholders, the aggregate number of people in churches and synagogues outweigh the number of businesses that they have already met with, and yet there's been no conversation with them at all. So my urging was that that would take place. The members of this committee so directed, and yet we will likely not have that given the information that I have, and I'm concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council members, Kobe King. In the long list of goals that were read earlier, I did not hear a goal of putting out of business well over 100 haulers, but that's exactly what this proposal will do. Also in the long list of goals, I did not hear a goal of creating what would essentially be a duopoly by allowing any one hauler to have up to 49% of the overall contract, but that's exactly what this would do. I do want to commend Councilman Zine for bringing up the issue. There are 150 small haulers, many of them which are based in the city of Los Angeles, staff doesn't even know how many, who will probably be put out of business. Again, I think what you're hearing consistently is the need to increase the number of zones and also to limit the percentage of the contract, the percentage of the overall contract that any one company can have. I certainly hope that you'll amend your recommendation and pass that on to the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next three speakers are Jeffrey Dieter, Rochelle Reyes-Wanger, and Jaime Garcia.
I'm Jeff Dieter. I'm the Vice President of Clinical Support Services at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. I come in front of you because I really feel that hospitals need to have a special exemption. Liquidated damages is fine, but really public health comes before liquidated damages. And at any one time, that solid waste is being evaluated by 4 different health agencies, from the city to the county to the state to the federal government. At the same time, it would impact a place like ourselves, who 2 years ago was producing 600 tons of solid waste per month. We are now down to 400. How did we do that? We found a separate recycling company that handles all our 6 waste streams, and by the way, we do know where the final destination of everything goes, and they have their own staff 5 days a week, and that doesn't barely meet our needs to do recycling. So we feel as a entity and as the hospital setting, we're really doing our best we can, and we really should to put public health in front of these franchises. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. On behalf of Dignity Health and our 39 hospitals, I am here to let you know that we're deeply disappointed with the plan, specifically as it relates to hospitals. While we share in the city's waste diversion and recycling goals, Dignity Health continues to seek a full exemption from the franchise service model. It would be an understatement to say that Dignity Health cares about trash. Our mission calls us to redefine human health, to include a healthy environment and a healthy planet. I have written down for you our 3 main concerns. We can certainly talk about service needs all day long until the cock crows, but I will get straight to the point and focus on cost and our ability to control those costs. Dignity Health, given that we contract with a sole vendor to implement a system-wide, tri-state, integrated waste management program, we are wondering how the city can match the cost savings and operational costs that are already in place. The startup and ongoing administration and operational costs for the city will be certainly a factor for us, costs that will immediately and ultimately affect us. The plan does not seem to offer any net benefits to hospitals.
Thank you.
However, it does propel us to incur increased operating costs, and I want you to consider that given what our mission is. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jaime Garcia with the Hospital Association of Southern California. First, the implementation plan that is before you today lacks the detail for one to really make a sound decision in terms of whether this policy is ready for rollout. Specifically for the hospital section, this plan provides general comments on our health and safety concerns, but it lacks substance on how the stated concerns will be properly addressed. The plan simply concludes that the concerns can and will be addressed in the RFP. So I pose the question, will this RFP or RFPs come before this committee for review when it is ready? Second, hospitals in Southern Los Angeles County annually provide approximately $4 billion in non-compensated care. And today, hospitals are being asked to pay more for the program that offers absolutely no net benefit in terms of added efficiency, which is one of the Bureau's goals. This plan, however, will undermine progress hospitals have and continue to make in terms of increasing the diversion rate year over year. So I respectfully ask that you exempt hospitals given our unique needs and some of the testimony you're hearing today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next 3 speakers are Jose Martinez, Greg Schwartz, and Susan Hollander.
Good afternoon, Council and members. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to voice our concerns here today. We at White Memorial Medical Center value green initiatives and environmental goals. As a matter of fact, 5 years ago, our diversion rate at the hospital was 18%. Today, 5 years later, we're more than glad to say that it's 43%. We through our own initiatives, through choosing our own haulers, through addressing the public's concerns is how we do those things. So our concern with the proposed program is not its environmental impact, but how it's going to or potentially adversely impact what we already do. We don't know what the costs are going to be for the hospitals. We don't know what service recourses we're going to have if there are any kind of service interruptions or disruptions. And I know that there's talk about liquidated damages in the implementation program, but what is the real-time recourse we're going to have if we have issues with the hauler? We still don't have answers to those questions. And that is why we had hoped to gain exemption in the proposed program. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Greg Schwarz, excuse me, Vice President, St. Vincent Medical Center. I have reviewed the plan regarding the ordinance related to hospitals, and it's clear that hospital operators did not author this. Primarily speaking to the fact that the initiatives that the healthcare industry are facing right now is to reduce costs and increase efficiencies. Asking the hospitals to bifurcate their waste management contracts would essentially increase costs and decrease efficiencies. We ask that you eliminate this or take the hospitals out of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Weezar and Alarcon and distinguished members of the Council. My name is Susan Hollander. I'm with Providence Health and Services. 2 of our 5 hospitals in Los Angeles County are located within the city of LA. Providence Holy Cross Medical Center up in Mission Hills, which has a new silver LEED certified expansion that opened a couple of years ago, and Providence Tarzana Medical Center. We respectfully urge you to please consider exempting hospitals for all of the reasons delineated by the Hospital Association and my other hospital colleagues. I've talked to a number of experts within our hospitals, and it's really vital that we retain the ability to be able to contract with private haulers because of the unique needs that have been articulated. Also, there are a couple of additional reasons, and that is that for reasons of safety, occasionally because of human error, some biohazards, even nuclear or radioactive waste, end up in the compactors for solid waste, and that poses a threat, and we need contractors that can specifically deal with getting those out of the solid waste compactors and protecting health. The second, and I'll be very quick, is patient confidentiality. Sometimes patients tend to take off their ID bracelets. We're required by state and federal law to protect patient confidentiality. A lot of times patients will throw lab orders into the trash. It ends up in the solid waste. We need to have special contractors that will deal with those issues to protect that patient confidentiality. So for all these reasons, in addition to the cost that we're facing getting ready for healthcare reform, we really respectfully ask you to please consider exempting hospitals. Thank you.
Next 3 speakers are George Wetland, Carla Campos, and Tanya Ackel.
Good afternoon. I'm George Watland. I'm a conservation program coordinator for the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club has been a partner in the Don't Waste LA campaign from its beginning, so we're very excited to see progress on this front. The plan that the Bureau of Sanitation has laid out for implementing the exclusive franchise for commercial and multifamily waste is a giant step towards our city's zero waste goals. It will match the great recycling results that the city has already achieved for its single-family residences and serve as a model for other cities in California and nationwide. But we are not there yet, and we need to stay the course. We must not take our eyes off that vision of our zero waste future, of cleaner air, of cleaner and safer jobs, which are so badly needed, and of providing recycling services for all Angelenos in our homes, businesses, and where we work. This plan respects the needs of all stakeholders who have provided valuable input to the committee and the Bureau over the past several months. This plan is ready. We urge you to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Carla Campos, and I was a sorter at American Reclamation, a leading member of the LA County Disposal Association. They are also one of the haulers calling for more service zones. Some of you know my story. I was injured on the job, and I was fired for speaking out about my injury and the conditions that my coworkers and I endure. I am here again today because my coworkers cannot be. And it is important that you remember us as you vote today on the Bureau's plan for an exclusive franchise. We need the changes that are included in the plan. For too long, we have been voiceless in this industry. We do work most people would not want to do because it's dirty, it's dangerous, and it's hard. But we have been treated like the trash we hauled and sort. Many of us have been injured, and sadly, some of us have died. In nearly every instance, we were hurt because the company we work for cut corners. So protecting us should be the city's priority today, not protecting the waste companies. No matter what they say, they don't want the changes the exclusive franchise will bring. But my co-workers and I are counting on this. We are
If you could wrap it up,
counting on you
please.
to make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please approve the Bureau's implementation plan. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Tanya Kell, and I work at UCLA Labor Occupational Safety and Health Program, otherwise known as UCLA LOSH. And since the Don't Waste LA began focusing on this industry in late 2010, a lot has happened. First, we witnessed the tragic deaths of Armando and Eladio Ramirez, the two boys who died while working at a waste facility in Kern County because of employer neglect. The company these boys worked for neglected to train their employees on how to do their job safely. They were given flimsy painter's mask as their only type of respiratory protection in a confined space full of toxic gases. Then we saw the same type of neglect at another LA-permitted hauler when Cal OSHA cited American Reclamation, a company that's represented by people in this room who have made every attempt to stop or water down this plan for 36 health and safety violations and penalties amounting to $40,000. 5 of those citations were deemed serious, meaning likely to result in amputation or death. The exclusive franchise system proposed by Don't Waste LA is really the only system that will prevent these kinds of violations from continuing to occur.
Wrap it up, please.
Because it's the only system that will enable the city of LA to hold waste companies accountable. Please move forward with this plan today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next three speakers are Erica Thigh Patterson, Reverend Nat Keto, and Jim Smith.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Erica Patterson, and I'm a board member of the Westlake North Neighborhood Council and Neighborhood Council Plan Review Committee. I'm here to support the city's plan for an exclusive waste franchise because my community needs a system that will reduce the pollution, the traffic, the noise from waste hauling in our neighborhood and our streets. We strongly need a system that provides us with recycling service. Many of the residents in my community, including myself and small businesses, don't even have access to recycling services. We also need a system in which we can know we are paying fair rates for decent service. With the current system, renters and business owners are at the mercy of companies who provide very limited service options for prices that don't often make sense. We have engaged in this process with other folks for 3 years now, and there have been numerous stakeholder meetings, committee hearings, legislative visits, and discussions in full council. So we're elated to see that the city has heard us. Everything we need to protect the quality of life in our community from the harmful impacts of waste is here in this plan. Please don't delay any longer because we can't afford to wait. Please move forward with this plan for our community and for communities across Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm Pastor Matt Cadle of St. Mark's Lutheran Church in South Los Angeles, just across the street from the University of Southern California. At St. Mark's, we understand our mission is caring not only for those within our congregation, but for our entire community. And sometimes that means speaking up, especially for those whose voices don't often get heard. So today I stand as a pastor to support a policy that will have deep and lasting impacts in our community. The city's plan for a new franchise system will relieve the families who have suffered for too long with the dangerous traffic and pollution from the dirty trash trucks that plow through our neighborhoods. Just as importantly, this system will protect the hands and the bodies of the workers who bless us each and every day with the service that they provide our city, eliminating the things we throw away and recycling what can be diverted away from the landfills that are destroying our planet. So I ask you to hear this same call as city leaders. Please pass this policy that will protect our communities and the hardworking men and women who haul and sort our waste. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Jim Smith, representing Teamsters Local 396. On behalf of the thousands of men and women who sort and haul waste in the city of Los Angeles, we can say with great pride and certainty that the plan put forth by the Bureau of Sanitation will make LA a model city for waste and recycling jobs as well as diversion. But we're not there yet. We need to ensure that we create a system with meaningful standards and accountability that can actually be enforced. And we feel that the current proposal on the table, calling for 11 service zones without mandatory subcontracting, strikes the appropriate balance to accomplish this enforceability, while also ensuring a competitive marketplace for the long term. Calls for increasing the number of zones lose sight of this need for accountability and enforcement entirely, because every time you add another service zone, the Bureau's ability to effectively enforce job standards is diminished. Please remember that we're here because when left to their own devices, haulers have never enforced standards on themselves. The Bureau's implementation plan is well designed and thought out. Please adopt the proposal before you today. Thank you.
Leslie Van Kuren Campbell, Kabira Stokes, and Rabbi Jonathan Klein.
Hello, I'm Leslie Van Kuren Campbell, founder and principal of Sustain LA. I'm here to express our approval of the Bureau of Sanitation's plan for implementing the new waste franchise, and in particular the designation of 11 waste service zones throughout the city. Sustain LA and other environmental leaders believe fewer zones make each zone a greater asset to the haulers. The greater the asset, the greater the incentive to invest in the much-needed infrastructure we need to meet standards and diversion goals. We are troubled by the suggestion of increasing the number of franchises. This would be a huge mistake, because as you increase the number of zones, you decrease the value of the asset that is each franchise. That means less investment and less diversion. Creating a piece of business that companies will compete for aggressively is the linchpin of the exclusive model. It will catalyze investment, collaboration, and high-road competition. Any increase in the number of zones will also decrease the city's ability to ensure accountability and enforce the very standards we have all worked so hard to bring to this new system. Approve the Bureau's plan with the recommended 11 service zones.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kabira Stokes. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Isidore Recycling. We are a full-service Los Angeles-based e-waste recycling company. We provide job opportunities to people with severe barriers to work, such as a history of incarceration. We are responsibly recycling e-waste. That's to your point, Councilmember Koretz. And we are creating recycling jobs here in Los Angeles. I'm here today in full support of the Bureau's implementation plan. I believe that you have struck the right balance of what is needed for a system that will achieve all the city's goals. Namely, we need a system that will provide incentives for haulers to invest both in infrastructure, the facilities, the trucks, etc., and programming. We really need some public education here that are necessary to actually increase diversion. Specifically for Isidore and for the city, we need a system that will enable us to do more than recycle what we're already recycling. We need to be able to handle responsibly streams like e-waste, like carpet, and we need a system for cleaner streams. These streams we need to address. The good news is that they're both money-making and they're also local job creators. I believe the Bureau's plan will take us in that direction. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rabbi Jonathan Klein, and as the Executive Director of Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, which represents hundreds of pastors, thousands of parishioners, I speak as an unwavering coalition partner with Don't Waste LA from day one of this campaign. As with the coal question, which we spoke about earlier, this is a question of policy that can make or break our children's futures. An exclusive franchise system is a vote for the future. And beyond coal, this is also a question of whether our economy treats human beings as chattel or as children of God. Those who work in this industry need enforceable protection from the potential abuse by those who employ them. The painful reality of bad players forces us to fix our current broken, unenforced system. This program is a win-win for our planet and for its inhabitants. Please be as courageous with our waste system as you were an hour ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our last two speakers, Adrian Martinez and Greg Good.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrian Martinez, and I'm here on behalf of the Natural Resources Defense Council and our thousands of members who are in Los Angeles. I echo a lot of the comments from my coalition members in the Don't Waste LA coalition. We want this to move forward today. We think this is an important step. One issue that has come up today is public process. At the last Energy and Environment Committee, I spoke in public comment about the many hearings that have taken place. There's been numerous stakeholder meetings. There's been many hearings in these two committees. And as you may recall, the LA Chamber and other business organizations thankfully requested that there be another great process that moves forward, which is an environmental impact report under the California Environmental Quality Act. So there is ample opportunity to weigh in. There's been multiple stakeholder meetings, many meetings, and people have had a chance. It's time for this committee to recommend that full council approve this implementation plan. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members, staff. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Greg Good. I'm the director of the Don't Waste LA project. I'd like to focus on the premise that we've heard a few times, that there are victims in this system. Let's be clear. There are no small haulers that do this business on a regular basis. There are mid-sized haulers. There are approximately 12 to 14 companies that really do this business as a regular line of business, as a main line of business in the city of Los Angeles. Only two of which are based in the city of Los Angeles. Of those, you have 4 big companies and you have mid-sized companies. Those mid-sized companies, represented by the LA County Disposal Association and actually several other lobbyists in this building, are several things. They're all multi-million-dollar companies. They're all part of their own lobbying association, the Los Angeles County Disposal Association. Powerful and rich enough to have managed to be power broker sponsors for the last 7 years in the annual LA political roast. And they are also folks who have exclusive franchises in other jurisdictions. What they are not is victims. This system, this transformation, is not about protecting parochial interests. It's about our future. Thank you so much, and please move forward with this plan.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who came. Any last-minute questions or comments from our colleagues? No, Mr. Koretz?
I just wanted to agree on the studio on location issue. I suspect we all have concerns about that, and I just wanted to clarify that that should not be part of this process. Most of my concerns that I've discussed with the department a few times have been resolved, which is how we deal with it on-site at the studios, which I think is probably their greatest concern, but I think it actually makes no sense to include them in this process on location. I agree with the comments that were made earlier, and I just wanted to clarify that we're not intending to do that.
So, staff, 2 questions. Number one, is on-site location included or not included? And what is your recommendation? Offsite.
On-site location, by the nature of the preponderance of the waste, which is construction and demolition, as we had said in the earlier discussions, was not going to be included. Having learned more about the studios and their functions, to the extent that there's an interrelationship between their studio shoots and on-location shoots, we felt that the ability to deploy, the ability to assign a hauler to a on-location shoot that has also a function on their in-studio solid waste services, that we, because of that interrelationship, we would include them in this alternative model, which ties them in a way because of their in-studio needs, but the interrelationship with what they have on location. We could, for example, say, well, let's just exempt or leave the on-location out as they were going to be because of their C&D preponderance of the waste. But then it brings us back to what we do on studio. But I know there's an interrelationship, unless I didn't see their business model well enough. But I know there's an interrelationship with how they deploy and how they utilize and how they hire haulers. And they got to be mobile, and they got to be able to move and deploy immediately when they need them. Crossing lines, boundary lines, political lines, jurisdictional lines. They got to have that ability. And so this alternative model that we're providing provides them that, gives them that. So if we leave the on-location out, as initially we said they were going to be because they're under C&D, then the question comes back to what do we do with in studio? And we don't have a recommendation for you to leave them out of the franchise system. We don't have that recommendation.
Well, this is the first we've discussed it, so I haven't really looked at this issue intensely, but
my understanding in our discussions with the studios were that they were satisfied with our proposed alternative, but perhaps you can ask them if they are satisfied with our proposed model.
That would be great to hear, because I thought the solution for the actual studios themselves on site was a good one.
Yeah.
Whether this makes sense for them, I'm not clear.
If you want me to say a few words,
Please.
Councilman, our understanding in all of our previous discussions had been that the on-location filming would be, because of its temporary nature, would be considered C&D and therefore not subject to the franchise system. And also understanding that there are productions coming from outside the city into the city, and from the city outside the city, companies that are not located here in the city. To Mr. Zeldivar's point, we may have productions that film on the lot and then on location, but we may not. We may have productions that film only on the lot or only on location. And I think it was our understanding that the on-location piece would be treated as temporary construction and demolition, and that the studio facilities would be subject to this alternative program that we've discussed. That has been our understanding, based on previous board reports and bureau reports and other conversations that we've had.
That would have been my understanding as well, and what I thought made sense. I was kind of surprised by this alternative approach to that one issue.
Yeah, like I said, we're not recommending right now in our report that the studios on site be left out of the system. Clearly, it's your decision. We tie them together and that they be covered under this alternative model that largely gives them the freedom that they clearly need and require to be able to operate unimpeded and in recognition of their agility and the mobility of their business. So, but if
Mr. Lacon, did you?
I would recommend that we move forward as proposed, but ask the department to have continuing discussion and dialogue with the studio industry and see if we can't bring more clarity to the issue, and then have that discussion, or if we have to change it when it goes to council.
I think that might be the appropriate direction, because I think we've had a number of discussions with the studios, and we've come to an alternative program that we haven't done for anyone else, that we've shown our interest in supporting and recognizing the different type of issues we're dealing with the studios. And this issue brought up by Mr. Koretz and the discussion, I think, merits additional discussion. Perhaps we could resolve before it gets to council, and we'll be happy to as chairs of this committee, work with Mr. Koretz as well to make sure his concerns are met before we come up to get to council.
Sounds fine. Thank you.
Yeah, I would also like to remind people that the RFP does incorporate the notion of subcontracting into it, and so if there are special needs in the various communities, whether it be hospitals or studios, the idea would be that if the hauler that is the primary proposer doesn't have the ability to provide a specific service, that they would incorporate into their RFP an agreement to subcontract with somebody who can provide that service. So those of you who have those special needs really should work with those groups to ensure that your needs are met, and it would be best if they were met in the RFP process.
Mr. Zine?
And I would support that on the studios, the motion picture industry. I'd also be concerned, and I know you said they're going to discuss more with the hospitals, but there are a lot of representatives here. We should also parallel that along the same path, because there's special needs. The special needs for the hospitals as well as the motion picture industry. I think if we put that together on a parallel track to resolve the issues and the concerns they have, because there are legitimate issues and concerns that I think we need to address to keep them out of hot water and to do what we need to do that we've been discussing for the last couple hours. So if we could parallel those together, I think that'll benefit the hospitals, also the motion picture industry at the same time, and the rest of it can go forward without any other modifications.
We're asking for additional discussions with the hospitals before it gets to council.
Just to be clear, we would move the whole package forward, but we're asking staff to continue discussions on the issues of hospitals and studios.
Yeah.
Okay. And then before it comes to the full council, those matters will be resolved. We don't need to bring it back to committee.
Yeah, exactly. So with that, well, thank you everyone for your attention to this matter. I want to thank the Board of Public Works and the Bureau of Sanitation for doing tremendous work to get us to this point. It's been a long time since the original motion was first introduced, but there have been endless hours and time and effort that's put into this. And certainly all the stakeholders have been very involved throughout the process, which is an important item as we move forward to make sure there was that communication necessary. And we've done that. I think we fulfilled that. Not only that, but by the time it got to council, there were numerous motions that were made by various council members. I think all those motions were given the attention they deserved and resolved and worked through. So there may have been some disagreements, but they got the attention they deserved through that. You've, I think, analyzed everything from customer needs to community input to rent stabilized units, worker safety, food waste, and many other issues. But I do think that this plan is ready for council, and we'd like to move it forward now to council. Mr. Koretz?
Just for the public and everyone involved, do we have a sense of when this comes to council?
We believe before the end of this month. I think the goal right now is the 24th, but that is prior to having. That was with no additional items to discuss. So the planned time was, I'm sorry, did I say October? No, I still had that in my head, right? No, April 24th. But with the two additional items that we need to resolve that may or may not be our plan goal. We'll have those discussions. If it's ready to come on the 24th, we will. If not, we'll push it back. Okay. All right, so a motion to approve the package. So moved by Mr. Alarcon, seconded by Mr. Koretz. Any objections? Seeing no objections, so ordered.
So we'll move this as amended.
Pardon me?
So we'll move this as amended with the additional request for staff to work with the studios and hospitals before it gets to council.
Yes. The move with the amendment was with no amendments. It was just a direction
request,
to continue discussing that one item from the studios and continue discussing the hospitals. Thank you. Any other items on the agenda?
That completes your agenda.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, sir. No, because they read it at the very beginning. This is the same, yeah.